Today I'm going to talk about the Spring MVC. Already we have started with the discussion in the last class, weekend class. So we have a long session. I hope you have gone through the record. So I've discussed about the flow of Spring MVC and all. We saw a sample project of MVC, how to create a Spring MVC project. So today we'll carry forward our discussion. Just a second. Okay. So now let's consider an example how we can handle a client's request in Spring MVC. Complete end-to-end example we'll see. Sorry. So first of all, we'll start with a form here. Okay. So I got a register page here, if you can see this. See, just keenly observe this form. First of all, this form which you got here, let me just do this just a minute. This is a register form. Just a second. I'm going to use this HTML tags. We got. I'll edit this form. Okay. Yeah. Don't worry about the previous content which you got here. It's So actually we can create this form using Spring tag library. Soon we are going to use it, but at this point of time we can't use that Spring tag library. Uh, the next example which we'll see, there we'll use Spring tag library. Okay. Just yeah. Okay. You see, we got a form. It's just a simple register page with with this form in which you have this space. Now, if it is it's, you see here we got a Spring application. Now, how do we handle this form request using Spring MVC? How do we handle this form request using Spring MVC? Can you people tell me? We saw the flow. If you want, I'll show you people the flow here. Tell me, what exactly am I supposed to do to handle that form request? Yes. Sorry. So which component is mainly responsible for handling that forms request? Yes, from this flow. Yes. Uh, Dispatcher servlet, you see it's a predefined servlet. You'll find that dispatcher servlet will intercept the request, but on its own, it is not going to process the request, as I told you people, if you remember the flow. So dispatcher servlet will forward this request to which component here? The controller. So here, the controller will be responsible for processing this client's request. Okay, mainly the controller is responsible for processing a client's request. Please remember, when it comes to Spring MVC, you'll find that the controller is responsible for processing the client's request. If it is struts framework, then which component is used here to process the client's request? In struts framework, which component is used to process the client's request? You'll use action component. It is action component. Please remember. Okay. Yes. Now here we got a form. When that form is submitted on the server side, we're going to handle this form request using the controller here. We're going to use the controller. Yes. Let's do that. So we need to create a controller to handle this form request. So how to define a controller? Let's see. So define a class. I'll call it as register controller. Okay. And we'll add a package this way. Yeah. Click on finish. You see, this is a very simple Java class. It's just a normal Java class. It's not a controller as of now. So let's convert it into a controller. We'll convert this normal Java class into a controller. So what to do? All you need to do is just add this annotation @controller to make it a controller. You have to use this annotation. Now what is it? It's a controller. Now it is responsible for handling the client's requests. Now this controller is mainly responsible for processing the client's request, I can say. Yes. So now in the controller, we need to write that request processing code. So what you can do is here, you can define your own method in this controller and write the request processing code. Okay. In this controller, now what you can do is you can define your own method, user defined method, I can say, and write the request processing code in that method. Yes. So let's define a method. The return type of that method will be model and view object. So once the request is processed, let's say it will return that model and view object. Let's say I'll define a method with the name process requests. And to this method, a HTTP request object is passed. Servlet request object also. HTTP servlet request object is passed here. Okay. Now how do we map this controller to that form? That means whenever this form is submitted, whenever this form is submitted, I want, whenever that HTML form is submitted, I want this method to be invoked. I want this controller's method to be invoked. In this controller method, you're going to write the request processing code, right? So how will you map that form, the HTML form, to this controller method? Can you people tell me? Yes. So what you need to do is, first of all, I can say that you need to configure a URL for this particular controller method. You need to configure a URL for this method. So how to configure a URL? @request mapping. You can specify the URL here. Let's say register process. You can configure any URL you wish. So now the URL of this controller's method is register process here. That's it. Now you can use this URL and configure it in the form action attribute here, register process. So whenever this form is submitted, you see the request will be placed for that URL register process. On the server side, you see we got this controller method which is mapped to that, URL. Okay. Yes. That's it. So now when this method is invoked, now in this method you need to write the request processing code, right? You need to write the request processing code. So now we need to read that request information. Now we got request object, right? So you can easily do that. So you got that request object, so it won't be a big deal, right? Yeah, let's do that. So request dot get parameter. As of now, you see, I'm trying to explicitly read this form data this way, but later on I'll show you people. You'll find that in Spring Framework you got support, you know, to read this form parameters and all. Sorry. Yeah, you may have other fields also. You can read them similarly. Yeah. So now I want to send a response back to the client that the user is successfully logged in. I would like to send this message. Okay. So to render the response, you know, we'll use a JSP, right? We'll use a JSP. So let's do the same here as well. Now what I'm going to do is here, I'll create a JSP which is going to render the response. Now carefully observe where I'm creating the JSP. Here, it's a web application, so you'll have webin folder, right? So in that webinfo folder, I'm going to create a JSP here. In the webin folder, I'm going to create a JSP. Say I'll call it JSP as welcome JSP. So whenever this JSP is called, say it displays a message that you are successfully registered. Let's say just a message. Okay. So now once that controller is done processing the request, so this JSP should be invoked, and it is supposed to display that response. Okay, this JSP should be invoked and it is supposed to send the response. So normally if it is a servlet, what you're going to do, generally if it is servlets, after processing the request, how the servlet will make sure that the JSP is invoked and it displays that response, how it is done over there in plain servlets and JSPs. So we use request dispatcher, right? Servlet, what it does after it is done processing the request, now the response should be rendered back to the client. So in order to render the response back to the client, so the servlet can call the JSP page. Yes, using request dispatch. Yeah. Okay. So now, when it comes to this controller, Spring MVC controller, we have to create a model and view object. And in the model and view object, you need to supply that JSP name. You see, while creating the model and view object, you see, we'll pass that JSP name, just the JSP name, which is supposed to render the response here. Which JSP is supposed to render the response. So that JSP name, you see, it is passed onto this constructor. Only the name, not even the extension. Okay. To the model and view object, you need to simply pass the JSP name. So always you see that view component details, that means which view component is supposed to render the response. That view component details, you'll add it to the model and view object this way. Okay. To the constructor, you need to pass the details. Yes. Okay. Yes. So after that view component details are added to this model and view object, now we can return it to the framework, to the dispatcher servlet. So this method will be called by the framework itself internally, right? To the framework, it should return that model and view object. That's it. Mainly, you will find that we have that the dispatcher servlet which will process the request. Uh, Sorry, there will be slight disturbance, just only for today. So is it causing a lot of noise or is it fine? Let me know. Is there too much noise? Alright, okay. They've stopped. Fine. Okay, good. So tomorrow I planned the class in the evening instead of morning. Um, I can't take the class evening. Okay. Yeah, I'll be able to take the class. Yeah. Fine. So for a couple of days I'll schedule the sessions in the evening itself because that means your evening, which is my morning. Yeah. Okay. So you see this model and view object is returned to the framework in which you got that view component details. Now the framework, what it does, it will take that view component name, that view name, I can say the view name. And what it does with this view name, it will refer this view name to which component, can you people tell me by looking at this flow? view resolver. Very good. That's right. You know what happens once that controller returns the model in view object? You see, the dispatcher alert will take that model in view object, and it will read that view name. In our case, what is the view name? In our case, the view name is welcome. So it will read that view name and it refers it to the view resolver here. It will pass that view name to the view resolver. So what exactly the view resolver will do with that view name? Let's see. So first I will show you people the view resolver. You see, by default it is configured. I didn't configure it. So whenever we create this Spring MVC project here, you will find that wizard which you're using, that wizard itself will help us in creating this configuration files and configuring that view resolver by default. You see, just look at this view resolver once. Okay. You see, in this view resolver, the prefix is webinf views, the prefix property value. See, this prefix will be added to that view name welcome. The view name, whatever the view name, it is passed on to this view resolver. The view resolver will prefix that view name with this value, and then it will suffix it with .jsp. You see, it becomes a complete location of that JSP. It becomes a complete URL of that JSP. Yes. Okay. It becomes the complete location of that JSP. See, now the framework, what it does is, not framework, the view resolver. See, once it is done constructing this URL this way, it returns it to the dispatcher select again. Okay. So what is the responsibility of the view resolver? The view resolver will take that view name, will prefix it with webinf views, that is a prefix value. It will add it to that view name, and it will suffix that view name with .jsp. It will prefix the view name with webinf views and suffixes it with .jsp, which becomes the location of the JSP, I can say. You see, this is the location of the JSP webinf. Just a minute. Yeah, I'm sorry. So you see where exactly the JSP is. You'll find that the JSP is in that webinf views folder. That is the location of the JSP. This way always the view resolver will take that view name and it returns the location of that JSP. We'll take that JSP name, I can say, and returns the location of the JSP. Okay, as of now, for time being, this is our assumption. This is what it does. But later on, you'll find that view resolvers can be different types. You know, as of now, we are only considering JSPs as view components. Okay, uh, but you will find that we got other types of view components also. We'll use different types of view components. Yes. Okay. So in that case, we'll use other view resolvers. Yeah. There are different types of view resolvers which will make use of. Fine. So let's try to run this code. Okay, we are done with this. You know what? Here, I would like to log this activity, especially when this controllers method is called. I would like to log this details. Okay, especially when this controller method is called, I would like to log this details. So what to do? Let's see. You know, we got a framework called as log4j. This is not specific to Spring. Okay, generally you can use this log4j in Java, but make sure that you download this log4j framework libraries. Okay, so you got something called as log4j. It's a logging framework, simply used for logging purpose. So you have to first of all make sure that you download this log4j libraries. Now, how do we do that? In our project, we are using a tool which will take care of this libraries and all, right? Generally, we call them as dependencies, you know that. Already in the pom.xml file, see by default this log4j dependency is added here in Spring projects. You can use it in other frameworks also. See log4j. Okay, it is added here. So the framework, the Maven tool will download this log4j. So now I'll do this logger equal to, yeah, you got a logger class. Just obtain the logger this way. Register controller dot class. Sorry, just I'll print this message. Process request method invoked. Okay. You see, you can trace the activity of this application. Okay, you can trace the activity of the application. Okay, you'll come to know the method invocations and all. It helps you people for debugging and all. It will be very helpful. Okay, yeah. So let's try to deploy this application. Let's see that log activity, how it looks like, or that logging. So for traceability, it helps us a lot for tracing. Okay. Okay, so I'll place the request for this JSP page first of all. You know, let's type in the details. Okay, now it has changed. So let's submit this form. See down the console is blank. Click on register. You see down you'll find that method is invoked. Yes. Okay. So the JSP is invoked here. Now just a minute. Okay. Now you see, so the controller is invoked and controller it returns that model in view object. It can read that request information and all. Fine. So hope you people got this flow. Now let's do one thing. Here we'll try to add some database interactions also, DB interactions to process a request. Okay. But for that we'll go for another form. So I'll keep this form aside, but it is very useful form, register form. I'll come back to this again. I have to show you people a lot of features here. Okay. Now let's do one thing. Earlier we used to implement that product search flow, right? So here, if it is a Spring framework, in Spring framework, let's say how to implement that product search. Okay, how to implement that product search. Let's see. Yes. So you got this search JSP page, right? I'll copy this search page, search JSP. I'll paste it here. You see, this is a very simple form. This page, this JSP page, you see, it just has got a form with one text field in it, just one text field, which takes the product ID, and you got a sub number. That's it. Okay. So you see, whenever this form is submitted, now this form request we have to handle it. Now, can you people tell me quickly how do I handle this form request? What exactly am I supposed to do here? How do I handle this form request? So what exactly am I supposed to do here? Yes. So first of all, we need to create a controller, right? To handle this form request, and you need to configure a URL for that particular controller. So let's create a controller. We'll call it as a product search controller. Yes. We'll annotate it with @controller. Let's define a method here. I'll call it as product search. The method name can be anything you wish. Now we need that request information, right? So we'll get it through this HTTP server request object. Yeah, and we'll configure a URL for this particular method using request mapping. So the URL is, let's say, search product. Okay. Yes. So okay, you see already that action attribute value search product here. Okay. Yes. So now let's read that product ID. Request dot get parameter product ID integer dot parse it. So we got the product ID. Now what's next? So we need to fetch that product record from the database server. So now in order to interact with the database server, so what are all the options we have here? Can you people tell me? So what are all the options you have? Okay. Yes, we can use JDBC API, right? We can use JDBC API. Yes. So we can also use Spring JDBC. In that Spring JDBC, yes, as you said, we can also go for JDBC template. You see, before this Spring MVC module, before this MVC module, so we have worked with Spring JDBC module, right? We have worked with Spring JDBC module. So already we have that DO, which is the Spring JDBC. So what I'm going to do is now, I'm going to use that Spring JDBC module here, okay, to interact with the database server. So if you want to work with Spring JDBC module, so Are we supposed to make any changes to this application? Do we need anything here to work with Spring MVC module? Yes. Yes. So first of all, you need to add the dependencies related to Spring JDBC module. That means you need to add libraries. First of all, you're supposed to add the libraries here. Okay. So let's add Spring JDBC libraries. Okay. Yes, the dependencies. That's right. So already we have the dependencies list. What is needed in that Spring JDBC project? I'll just copy them. You see, these are the couple of dependencies which you need. Now I'll add them to this project here. You see, one dependency is Spring JDBC, the other one is MySQL connector Java. What is this MySQL connector Java here? Yes. What is this MySQL connector Java? What does that means? MySQL connector Java means it is what library? It is Spring JDBC. Sorry, not Spring JDBC. I'm sorry. It is JDBC drivers. MySQL JDBC drivers. You know that in order to work with JDBC API, you need JDBC drivers, right? So that JDBC drivers, they are also needed for Spring JDBC because Spring JDBC internally, it uses JDBC API itself. Okay, yes, fine. Okay, so now, this property, whenever you're copying the dependencies from another project, make sure that this property names especially, they're valid here also. Make sure that the properties are declared here. Now, for example, you got this property here called a spring.framework.version. So that it's a property. You'll find that that property is actually not declared here in this form.xml file. So though it is declared in that other XML file, but it is not declared in this XML file. So what to do? So you need to make sure that either you declare the property or make changes. Already there is a property Spring framework. You can make use of it. Spring framework -version. So what is this property actually? Property means, yes, oh sorry, org.springframework.version. So what exactly do we mean by properties here in this XML file? What is a property? Yes. Property means it's nothing but it's a variable, I can say, which is declared in this form.xml file. You can think of it as a variable which is declared in this form.xml file. You see, here it is there. So what is that value of that variable? You see, if it is a variable, you'll have a value associated to it, right? What is the value of that variable? It is 3.1 point release. So that means here this property value is your Spring version, I can say, which you are using here. It's actually the Spring version which you're using. Okay. Fine. So now we are done adding the dependencies. What I'm going to do is, already we have this JDBC code, right? With the Spring JDBC code. I'll copy that those DO and that VO package here. I'll paste it here. Already we have that DO and the product class. Already they are defined. So I'll just make use of it. You see this product DO, it uses JDBC template, row mapper and all, And along with it, we have this, product class also. Okay. So now you can make use of this DO in that controller. Okay. So what is now? So DO is going to help the controller to fetch that product records from the database, right? So that means what is the DO for the controller? What is the DO for the controller? What exactly is the DO for the controller? Yes. Come on. So controller uses DO, right, to interact with the database server. So what exactly is the DO here for the controller? It's a dependency. That's right. It is basically a dependency. Right? So let's configure that DO, which is a dependency for the controller. Now I'll use auto void annotation here. Okay. So that container now will obtain that product DO, and it is going to inject that product DO into this controller. Okay. Yes. So, but we got few more things to configure. If you're working with JDBC template, what else is needed? Are we supposed to do anything else here? You need to configure the database details, right? We need to supply the database details. So where you will add the database details, we'll see that later. Okay, we'll see how to configure database details. But let's try to process the request first of all. We'll write the processing code. So we'll call this a do method, get product by ID, pass that product ID. So it returns that product object reference. Straight away you'll get a product object in which you have the product details. So basically the product details are fetched from the database. So now here, what's the next thing we need to do here? Yes, we got the product details, right? I can say this is your response data. So what to do with this response data? So we have to make sure that this response is displayed back to the client, right? We have to make sure that this response is displayed back to the client. So how can we make sure that the response is displayed back to the client? So this is where we are going to make use of the JSP here, right? This is where we'll make use of JSP. So JSP is going to help us to render the response. That means not us, in the sense the controller will delegate that task to the JSP now to render the response. The controller won't directly call that JSP, you know that. Now the controller should supply that JSP details. Yes, that view component name I can say. So here, you see, we didn't create that JSP, we'll create it. Let's create a model and view object, and you see, we'll pass that view name. Let's say product view. The JSP name, it says product view, and we'll return that model and view object. Okay, this is fine, but one thing is missing here. Now, if we do this, what happens? The framework will call that JSP. That is fine. But what exactly the JSP is supposed to do? It is supposed to, let me stop the server for a while, okay? It is supposed to display that product details back to the client, right? It is supposed to display the product details to the client. That is what it is supposed to do. So that means now this controller is supposed to share that product details with the JSP page. In servlets, generally how a servlet will share the response data or the data with the JSP, how it is done in servlets and JSPs. Yes. using the scope objects, right? Very good. A servlet can share that response data with the JSP through the scope objects. But here, you see, we don't use that scope objects. Instead, what you're going to do is, we need to add that response data to the model and view object itself. Okay, that response data should be added to the model and view object itself here. So how can we add the data to the model and view object? You see, it is very similar to that adding of data to the scope objects. Okay, model and view dot add object method is there. So what is that object name you want? Let's say product itself. And which object you want to add this to? You want to add to this model and view object? Product object. That's it. The first parameter is the name of the object which you are adding to that model and view. The second parameter is that object reference itself, which object you are trying to add. That's it. Okay. So you see, that's the reason why the name of this object is model and view. Model represents the response data. View means it represents that view component. So you have the view component details as well as the response data in this model and view object, right? We got both the details here. Yes, we got the response data as well as the view component name. Yes, that's the reason why it is called as model and view object. Okay. Fine. You see, now we need to create a JSP. So this controller is done. Now we need a JSP here. Yes. Product view JSP. So now this JSP is supposed to display the product record, right? Yeah. So we'll align it to the center. Okay. Now you see, framework will call this JSP page because we are supplying because in that model and view object we have configured that JSP details itself. So the thing is here, how the JSP will be able to read that product object from that request scope, I'm sorry. Now how the framework will pass that product object to this JSP? How the framework will pass that request object to this JSP page? That is also important. You know, the framework will pass that product object to the JSP through the request scope itself. Internally what the framework does is, it will add that product object, it will read it from that model and view object, it will add it to the request scope and it forwards it to the JSP. Now if it is in request scope, now we have many options to read that object, right? So we got many options to read that object from the request scope. Yeah, you see, we'll try to display those details. I'll use expression language straight away. Product dot ID. That's it. Name. Price. And description. Okay. That's it. So this way, we'll display the product details. You see, you can very easily access them from that scope object. It's request scope itself here. Okay. Yes. So we have linked everything, right? Okay. Now we got. I'll just add that logger also, so that log completely to all these components which we're using. We'll add that logger. We are missing one more thing. What is it? Can you people tell me? We have to do one more thing. What is it? You think about it. Meanwhile, I'll write this logging code. So info means general information. View resolver is already configured, right? So we don't need to edit it. The DO also, you see, I'll add that log activity, log data logging. So which method will be called? For that particular method, I'll add it as of now. Sorry, logger dot info get product by ID. Yes. Okay, fine. Let me redeploy that application. I'm sorry. As I told you people, we have to do one more thing. Something is missing. The database configurations. You see that in that DO we don't specify those details, right? The database configurations. So how will you configure the database details here? In the JDBC class we saw that. How to configure the database details. So we got a bean class. Predefined bean class is there to configure the database details. What is that bean class? Yes. Yes, very good. Driver manager data source. Bean class is driver manager data source. The IDs. So you have this properties like driver class, sorry, driver class name or g dot gzt dot mm dot mysql dot driver. Yes. URL jdbc colon mysql colon double slash localhost colon 3306 slash test. Username values root property password values root. Yeah. And what else we need to configure here? That's it. Very good. Yes, exactly. So we need to configure JDBC template here, which is a dependency for which component? JDBC template is a dependency for which component? Can you people tell me? So which component here in our application uses JDBC? Sorry, JDBC template. Product DO. Very good. Exactly. So you see, now for the JDBC template, the dependencies that driver manager data source object. Okay. Yes. That's it. So
Yes, I have one question.
yeah, tell me.
Uh, Here we define a name is equal to data source. It is a mandatory to like, the name should be data source, and we can do something else.
Yeah, data source is a mandate. Here, you know what? You're talking about this name. So name is actually a property in the JDBC template. Okay, you'll find that it is supplied as a dependency. Data source is is a property. It's a reference variable, I can say, which represents as a dependency itself here. Okay, yes. So that reference, we want the container to inject this data source object as a dependency here. Okay, yes. Data source where it is configured on top. You see, this ID can be anything you wish. This ID can be anything. Yeah, just a minute. Yeah, I'm sorry, guys. Okay. So Yeah, this ID can be anything you wish. Okay, and here this ID also can be anything. But you see, this names, they are, what are they? Names represent the properties or variables in the, yes, they represent the properties or variables in that bean classes. So hope you people got it. Okay, fine. So that's it. So this is the configuration which you got. So is it clear for everyone? Okay. Next, you know, we got the product DO. For the product DO, that JDBC template is a dependency, you know that. You see? Yes. So I'll explain the flow once, don't worry. But once try to deploy this, we'll try to run this code and then I'll explain the flow, okay? So search.jsp, I'll type in the product ID and I'll click on search. You see, you got the product records. Down you see how that log information is displayed, which is going to help you people to understand that method invocations. Okay, so it helps you people to trace the program, the execution and all. So first, product search controller is invoked when we submit the form, right? That controller in turn, what it is doing, it is calling that product do method get product by ID. You see that method is called. You know what it does? It returns a product record, so which in turn is added to that model and view object and passed on to the JSP. That means the controller will not directly pass that component to the JSP. You know that? Yes. So the controller will simply add it to the model and view object. Now the framework will take care of passing that product object to the model and passing that product object to the JSP page. Okay, that is how it works. Okay, so from here the flow starts from the search page. So when you submit the search page, the request will be placed for this URL search product. So we got a controller. In that controller, you see we got a method whose URL is configured as search product, right? So this controller's method will be called. So this controller method, what it does, it will read that product ID, and you see it takes the help of that product DO to fetch that product ID based on the ID itself. Then once it gets that product object, it adds it to that model and view object here. You see, into the model and view object, that view component name, the JSP name, and that product object is also added to that model and view object, and it is returned to the framework. The framework takes that model and view object, it reads that view name, it refers it to the view resolver, right? So first it refers it to the view resolver. So the view resolver will return the location of the JSP page. So now the framework will call that JSP page, okay, which is in that web in views folder, and it will pass that product object through the request scope. That means it will add it to the request scope, I can say. Okay, yeah. So, so is this flow clear for you people, all of you? Any questions in waiting? Okay, good. So now we'll go through this components which you got. Now try to identify uh, what type of components they are. So if you think about this components with regard to the MVC architecture, now can you people tell me what component is what exactly with regard to the MVC architecture? But suppose you have this JSPs as per MVC architecture, they have what type of components? Spring MVC follows MVC architecture, right? Yes. They are view components, which are basically responsible for presentation purpose. Okay, building that view. Uh, that is the only part of the application which your end users can access or view, right? Yes. Next, what about this product search controller and dispatcher controller? Dispatcher servlet. Product search controller and dispatcher servlet. So, what are they? They are controllers, right? Which are responsible for processing the client's request. Okay. And what about that DO? Now, the other component which you got here is a DO. What about the DO then? It's a model component. Yes, it's a model component. Exactly, very good. So this way, you see, you'll find that in Spring MVC, you have these components accordingly segregated. Each component has got a specific functionality. Yes. Okay. So next, let's try to further explore the features of Spring MVC. We saw that register page, right? Just a minute. You know what, here as of now in the register page we have this form fields. So whenever this form is submitted, you see the controller will be invoked. Yes, the controller is invoked. And what exactly the controller does, it will read that request information. All right, it will read that request information. and it will process the request accordingly. You know, to read that request information in the controller, we have to write that code explicitly, right? Yes. As of now, we are writing that code here in the controller. You see, I'm using that request.get parameter method to read that form data and all. But, if it is a, if you see, if it is struts framework, hope you remember that we didn't write any code to read this request information. So that form data, you see, was read and it was populated into an object, right? It was populated into that action component itself. In the action component, we had fields, so the data was added automatically. And there in Spring in Struts2 framework, we have a specialized component which used to take care of it. Okay, so what is that component? I'm not sure whether you people are familiar or not. Uh, if not familiar, you are familiar, but at this point of time, you remember what is it? It's called as a interceptor, params interceptor, right? I'm trying to just make you people refresh that once so that at least you'll review it again. Okay, we got a params interceptor which is taking care of auto population of form data in struts2 framework. Okay, yes. When it comes to Spring MVC, do we have any such option? That means the framework will can it take care of this auto population of form data? I can say in Spring MVC we have that option. Okay, yes. In Spring MVC we got that option here. Okay, so that option is provided through the controller itself. So let's try to make use of it. Okay, but it's not that simple and straightforward as we did in struts2 framework. Okay, yeah. So you see, first of all, if you want to store that form data, you need a object for that. Okay, we need an object to hold that form data. So generally, the type of object, that object is actually called as a command object here in Spring MVC. That object is actually called as a command object. Okay, yes. So what we need to do is here we need to define a class for that purpose. So let's try to do that. Already I've got that class. You see, it's a register class which you people are very much familiar. Again, we'll be working with this class. Just a second. Okay, you see, just go through this register class. So each field here in the register class, it is going to help you people to hold that register class objects. I can say that we are going to use them to store the sorry form data. So each field here, it refers to a text field. It represents a text field in the register form, I can say. Yes. You see, this class you can call it as a command class. So the objects of this class are called as command objects. Please make a note of it. What is a command object here? Command object means the object which holds the command object means it's an object which holds form data. it holds form data. Yes. Okay. Yeah. So now we need to ask the framework to populate that form data into that command object. Okay. Populate the form data into that command object. So for that, you have to make the changes here in the controller. Okay. Let's see what changes you have to do. I need to define one more method here, and that method return type should be string, and the method name, let's say, if you want, you can give process request itself, or else I'll call it as show view. Okay, show view. The method should take a parameter called as model map, and the URL for this method, I'll configure it as register process itself, the same URL. But now I'm going to add few more details here. Just check this. So what exactly this annotation indicates? Actually, now we have two methods, but for both the methods, we have configured the same URL, right? So won't you think it can lead to any kind of confusion here? No, I can say no. So there won't be any issues here, because have you noticed it? The request method, I'm additionally configuring something called as request method. So what is this request method here? So the request method indicates that method, that controller method, will be handling which HTTP method request. It represents the HTTP method. You know, the first method which you got here, it indicates that first method which you got, it handles only get request. Which method? The show view method which you got here on top. The show view method which you got here on top, it only handles HTTP method get request. The second method, it handles HTTP method post request here. Okay, it handles HTTP method post request. Hope you people got it. But this method which we have defined now, that show view method, how we are going to use it? The show view method's main purpose is to register a command object, to register the command object and return that input JSP details, especially to register the command object. We use it, and to configure, to supply the input JSP details here. Yes, I'll show you people. So I'll create that register object this way. You see, we'll register that object here using add attribute. that object name, I'll call it as register. The reference you can pass it. So that means you see through that model and map object I'm supplying that command object details. So which should be used here to populate that form data. Which form data? Where is the form? Which form data here? You see that page in which you got that form, that page you can return that input JSP name here. Return that input JSP name. What is it? Register. This is what you need to do. You have to supply the input JSP name here. Got it? That's all you need to do. Now you know what happens? Yes. So basically we are trying to register that command object using this method, which method show view method. So when it is invoked, when a client places a get request, HTTP method get request for that URL register process, and what it does, it will also return that input JSP details also. It will also return that input JSP details as well. What is it? Register JSP. Yes. Okay. Yeah. Fine. So now once I'll execute this code, I'll show you people how this code works. It's very important to understand that. This time, when we are using this kind of command object and this methods, make sure that your register page is in views folder. Please make a note of it. What I did now, that register JSP page, I've moved it to views folder. Webinf views. Views folder is in Webinf directory. Okay. Yes. So here now, if it is under the Webinf folder, can we directly place a request for that JSP page? Can we directly place the request for that JSP page? Can we directly access that JSP page? I can say you cannot. If it is under the Webinf folder, you cannot directly access the resources, web resources which are under the Webinf folder. Okay, so it is not possible. Then how to call that JSP now this time? Let's see. First, let me deploy this application on the server. Okay, now I'll place a get request for that particular URL. What is it? What is the URL? Register process. You see, for both the methods we have it we have the same. How to place a get request here? I have to use I have to type in that URL directly in the address bar. Okay. And one more thing, I'm sorry. Make sure that this form method change it to post. Make sure that the register form HTTP method is post here. Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry. Now let's try to place a request for register process. You see, when you place a request for that URL register process, what happened? That form is displayed, and down in the console, I want you people to notice which method is invoked actually. Which method is invoked? The controller's method is invoked. Show view method is invoked. Okay, can you see this down? Show view method is invoked here. So this is what happens whenever you place a request by typing in that URL in the address bar. It is a HTTP method get request. For that get request, you see that show view method will be called because you see that show view method is annotated with get method, HTTP method get. Okay, it can only handle that HTTP method get details. Yes. So what exactly this method does, that show view method, when it is invoked? First of all, it registers that command object. That means that register object will be configured here. And next, it returns that input JSP name. So what is the input JSP name? Register itself. So the framework will take that JSP name, input JSP name, and what it does with that JSP name, what do people think? The framework, what it is going to do with that JSP name, input JSP name? It's a view name, right? What it does? It's a view name. So basically what it does, so it will refer it to which component? View resolver. Always the view name will be referred to the view resolver. So that view name register will be referred to that view resolver here. So the view resolver, what it does, it returns the location of that input JSP, that is register JSP. So that register JSP will be invoked here. That is what happens. The register JSP is invoked. Yes. Okay, fine. Now one more change which I was supposed to do was, now we don't need to explicitly read this form data from that request object. Now you can change this parameter to register object itself straight away. Change it to register object itself. Yes. So straight away you're going to get a register object. So I'll just try to display those details here in the console itself, in the server console itself. Let's see, just to understand whether that form data is populated or not into that object. We'll try to display those details. Okay, that's it. So just check this once. Let's try to deploy this application on the server once. Let's see the flow. So we'll place a request for that JSP page. Sorry. Okay. Just a second. Not JSP page. You can't access it directly. You'll get this error 404. Though it is displaying it initially because the browser has loaded it earlier, so it has cached it. but you won't get it, you see. So what to do? Place a request for that URL, register process. So you'll get there. Down that show view method is called. So which is actually returning that input JSP name. That means we are placing the request for that controller method, which returns that input JSP name and which is displayed here. And that controller method, that show view method, it did one more thing. It has registered that command object also, which will be used to populate the form data. Okay, yes, it did both things. Now see, you got the form. You can type in that data in the form. Let's try to do that. Now, this time we'll submit the form. So if I submit the form, so what do you people think? Which HTTP method will be used by the client to place a request? Which HTTP method will be used by the client to place a request? Which HTTP method will be used? Post. Because in the form, I've changed that method to post. Yes. So the client uses HTTP method post to place a request. You see the action URL is same. What is it? Register process. The action URL is same. Register process. Yes. But HTTP method post will be used. You see down. As of now, only one method is called show view. I'll submit this form. Yep. You see, you got that welcome JSP. But now I want you to see this details also. You see, when we submit the form, what happened? The process request method is called. But before that process request method is called, there is one more thing which has happened in between. What is it? That form data was populated into that command object. The form data is populated into that command object, that register object, and we see it is passed onto that method. Which method? Process request method, which is able to display the details. You see, you got the data. This time we didn't read that form data explicitly, right? So it was populated by the framework itself. So and we are able to read it. Yes, so it works. So this is very important flow. So hope you people got it. So is it clear for you people, all of you? Any questions? Yes. So hope you got it right, all of you. So make sure that you practice it, okay? And I got few more things to show you people here, like validations and all, and different types of view resolvers, and creating custom view components. I'll also show you people how to generate PDF content and all. Okay, we'll see how to generate PDF content. So these are all the things which we'll see in the next session. Tomorrow there's no class in the morning, but I'll try to conduct it in the evening. Let me try to find out the possibilities and I'll mail you the timings. Okay, yeah, evening at what time we can meet, I'll let you know. Okay, yeah. So that's all for today. So let's meet tomorrow evening. If possible, I'll let you know. Otherwise, we'll meet day after tomorrow. I'll mail you, confirm. Okay, confirmation mail I'll send you. Yeah. Thank you all. I wish you a happy Diwali in advance, all of you. Yeah. So hope you will celebrate Diwali. Yeah. Thank you all. Bye bye.